Hi friends, hello, hi, how are you? I hope you guys are having an amazing day today. Hello, hi. So first of all, today's candle of the day is Waikiki Beach Candle, or Waikiki Beach Coconut. One of you guys commented and you were like, you butchered the name of this candle. So I looked it up and now I'm ready. It is Waikiki Beach Coconut. By the way, just as a side note, this is becoming one of my favorite candles. I don't know why. Normally coconut and like, tropical scented candles are not my absolute favorite, but this one, for whatever reason, I cannot stop burning it. It smells so good. Anyway, hi! So today's video, we are going to be getting into the very weird world of influencer brand trips. This is a very loaded topic. There's a lot to discuss. There's a lot to get into, and I have a lot of feelings. One of you guys actually recommended this to me when I asked kind of what evolution of style videos you wanted to see, and I thought it would be really cool to just dive into kind of brand trips, what their purpose was, the problem with a lot of them, and also kind of looking forward into what brand trips might look like in sort of a post-COVID world. Because I think now that COVID, there is seemingly sort of an end in sight. There's like a vaccine, like we're working on it. Now that that seems to be happening, I think it's going to be really interesting to analyze how things in our culture and things that sort of, especially on the internet, use how they used to be, how COVID has absolutely changed those things. So we're going to dive into all of that today. And yeah, let's do it. Hello, it's Editing Me, and today's video is sponsored by Felix Gray. I feel like the new trend lately has been blue light glasses, and I have seen advertisements for blue light glasses and just blue light glasses in general everywhere. I have been using this pair from Felix Gray since the beginning of January, so almost 3 months, and I am incredibly impressed. Something I found really interesting about Felix Gray and their glasses is that while most blue light lenses filter out like 2 to 3% of light, Felix Gray filters out almost 15 times of the light. So obviously that's a huge difference, and also on top of that, I think the glasses are very stylish. They're very lightweight and durable and can be customized to fit your face perfectly. I think there's a lot of arguments kind of for or against blue light, and if even using blue light glasses is something that's worth doing, because honestly blue light is basically everywhere. Not all blue light is bad. The problem really becomes overexposure or concentrated exposure for a long period of time. So for example, me sitting in front of my computer editing for like 7 hours, my eyes were never supposed to be staring at a screen for that long. And unfortunately, by staring at that screen for a long time, it can cause my eyes a lot of stress. It can cause things like migraines, blurry vision, or even issues sleeping. And if you guys have been following for a while, you know that I struggle with pretty severe light sensitivity, and I can imagine that staring at a computer screen for 8 hours a day was not helping that. So personally, I got the Nash pair, but you can get a couple of different kinds. The original optical lens, which is what I'm wearing, relieves most eye strain from daily screen time. And then they also have the sleep glasses, which basically are designed for late night screen viewing. So if you're in a dark room staring at a screen, that's kind of what those are designed for. And those were also designed to help improve sleep. Blue light standard glasses start at $95, or you can add your prescription and they start at about $145. If you don't love your glasses in the first 30 days, there's a no questions asked money back guarantee, which I think is fantastic. I was a little skeptical, honestly, of this whole thing. I was like, I don't know. But honestly, I got the glasses, I wore them for like 2 weeks straight, and then I just kind of took them off for a week and tried to see if there was a difference. And the best way I can describe it is it's like, when it's really sunny and you put on sunglasses and your eyes just feel immediately better. That's how the glasses make me feel when I look at a computer screen. Like, as soon as I put them on, my eyes just feel like they're working a little less. And you almost don't notice it until you go without it, and then you're like, oh, I needed this. My eyes definitely feel less strained. I definitely feel like I have less eye pain in general. I will have my special link down below if you want to go check out these glasses and buy a pair. I would highly recommend them. They really have been somewhat of a game changer, honestly. And also, they're very cute. A lot of you guys liked them when I posted a picture on Instagram wearing them. So thank you so much to Felix Gray for sponsoring this video. And if you guys are interested, go check them out. I really liked them. Okay, so let's first start this whole thing by just talking about what a brand trip actually is. If you've just never heard of this before, or you don't know what I'm talking about, a brand trip is basically PR, free stuff that influencers get on steroids. Because instead of getting like a free I don't know, bracelet and free makeup, you're getting a free vacation. Brand trips happen at all different sizes. So sometimes brands will take a group of small influencers to like Disneyland or Coachella, and other times they take some of the top influencers to places like Fiji and Hawaii and Paris. They can be large or small scale, and really what I've noticed after looking into it is it basically just depends on follower count. You're not going to take someone with 100,000 followers to Fiji, but you might take them to Texas to promote your brand. Now, I also feel like it's important to make the distinction right now between sort of makeup brand trips and influencer brand trips, because we're going to talk about the two, and I think they're very different. For example, makeup brand trips, I do feel like those specifically happened for a reason and a purpose. It was usually when the brand had a new product launching or something new happening within the brand that they wanted to bring attention to via bringing influencers on these trips. However, I think you have influencer brands that were just kind of like lifestyle brands, like the brand Dote is going to be talked about a lot in this video. And Dote seemingly didn't really have a reason to be taking people on these trips. They just like did it for promotion for the brand because they kind of were I still don't really know what Dote did, but they were seemingly like a marketplace type brand. So they always had stuff going. So they started utilizing influencer trips as well. The goal of the brand trip was basically to get hype for a product or a brand. That was the end game. Brands were not just taking these influencers on trips because they liked them and wanted to give them a vacation. The whole point was it was basically transactional. They were giving these influencers this sort of trip of a lifetime, and in return for that, these influencers would give the brand a ton of promotion. Now, I've talked to a couple of influencers who have gone on these types of trips, and just right off the bat, I feel like the biggest question people have is, do influencers also get paid to go on these trips? And based on the people that I have talked to, it seems like for the most part, no. You don't get paid to go on the trip. Your payment is basically the vacation. So if you think about it, it makes sense why these brands started doing this in the first place. Because we know now that for an influencer to post like a video that has your product in it, a product integration, that can cost tens of thousands of dollars for one influencer to post one video dedicated to your product, especially a top tier influencer who has like millions of followers, right? However, if you take them on a brand trip that sure might cost your brand like $500,000 to do, you're guaranteeing at least a sort of week of content from them, which is almost invaluable when it comes to advertising. And you're not actually paying them, you're paying for a trip. So brands probably ended up paying, believe it or not, paying less money to fly all of these influencers on private planes to Fiji than they would have by asking to sponsor a dedicated video, all of them individually. They probably did save money on these trips. So that's kind of why brand trips started and what they were. But I think it's important to talk about some of the key players in the brand trips because there were a lot of brands particularly that became known for these brand trips. For example, in the makeup space, I feel like you cannot talk about influencer brand trips without talking about Trippin with Tarte, because you could not go like a month without seeing for a while in like 2016. I feel like all I ever saw, especially in the summertime, were these Trippin with Tarte vlogs. From lifestyle influencers to makeup influencers, Tarte was basically taking everyone with 1 million subscribers to Fiji at one point in time. And the thing about Tarte was they were not only known for taking these influencers on these very luxurious trips, right? Because they would take them to Fiji and they wouldn't just put them in a hotel room. Like they'd give these influencers freaking bungalows. Like they were spending money to send these influencers on these very luxurious trips. On top of that, it was speculated that influencers were getting these insane gifts. I saw people get Gucci bags. I saw people get Roombas. You would get, t-shirts, towels, hats. Like it was basically like a gifting suite once you got into your hotel room at this trip. So it wasn't even just the fact that they're going on trips, they're getting all of these perks as well. If you watch those vlogs, it's actually crazy because Tarte not only gifted them all of this stuff, but on top of that, Tarte would literally provide an extra suitcase to most of their influencers so they could bring home the just absolute massive amount of stuff that Tarte was going to give them for free. Like they were getting so much stuff that Tarte just said, here, take this suitcase as well. We'll ship it all home for you because you're going to get so much free stuff. Now, what makes this especially interesting is on top of this already free stuff you're getting, like I cannot believe they all got Roombas. On top of this free stuff that you're getting, you're also getting basically Tarte's entire collection of makeup. They gave them everything. All of these influencers would come home with just a mountain of Shape Tape to show off to their audience. The interesting thing about Tarte, that I feel like they were doing this before other brands maybe picked up on it, but I already said they did different trips. So Tarte would do one trip where it would just be makeup influencers. You would have like, you know, James Charles, Jeffree Star, Patrick Star, Nikki Tutorials, Manny MUA, like you would have all of them on a trip together, and they were all kind of the makeup gurus, Nikita Dragon, like Bretman Rock, you had all of them, right, on their like makeup trips. And then they also did separate trips with lifestyle influencers. So you had like Nikki and Gabby, Adeline Morin, Remy Ashton, Alicia Marie, Laura DIY, Miss Tiffany Ma, like you had all of them also on these different trips. And I think Tarte realized pretty quickly how much more beneficial it would be to kind of have the niche of lifestyle influencer under their thumb. And here's what I mean by this. By bringing makeup influencers onto these trips and giving all of these makeup influencers all of this makeup and all of this stuff, they were absolutely like getting the point across. They had the targeted audience of people who really liked makeup. However, makeup influencers get so much in PR already from makeup brands that even though they would maybe, you know, utilize Tarte products a little bit more, they were still not fully showcasing only Tarte products, which I think Tarte probably wasn't getting as good of a return on investment by sending them on these trips long term. However, by getting these lifestyle influencers who maybe weren't on every single makeup PR list ever, they were on smaller PR lists for makeup stuff, they decided that by filling their makeup collections with Tarte, it was 10 times more likely that they were going to be featured in vlogs down the line. Any makeup content they did do, Tarte was going to be featured. Makeup clear out, it's all Tarte. If you look at these lifestyle girls' makeup collections, it really is, for the most part, completely filled with either Tarte or Benefit, because those were the two brands that definitely saw the advantage of making their products staples for lifestyle influencers, which I think is very interesting because you would think logically it would make sense to only really bring the makeup gurus, but they kind of stopped doing that after a little while and really put their focus on lifestyle influencers and building up brand loyalty with these lifestyle influencers. Now, obviously Tarte is not the only brand that does this, but I will say they are the most notable for sure. But you also have brands like Benefit. You have brands like Jouer. Jouer took everybody to France at one point in time. You had brands like Benefit who are taking all of these lifestyle girls to Japan for like a week, and they get to just like be in Japan. There was that huge Benefit trip that happened that was with like Jeffree Star and Nikki Tutorials, where they went to Nectar Island and they all just like partied on the beach. Like the vlogs and the content you would get from this were endless because you weren't only getting, oh, this is just, you know, a Nikki Tutorial vlog or a Patrick Star vlog. You were getting it from every single influencer's perspective, and they would show up in each other's vlogs. It was like the ultimate crossover event, right? These big brand trips. So on the surface level, it definitely seems sort of just like a positive. It's like, okay, all these brands took all these influencers on trips. Like, what is the issue with that? What's the problem? I think the problem became with number one, I think that promoting a product by sending already very rich people on trips that they could already afford is just like a weird marketing move. Like, I don't know. I get it, like I do, but it was just like a very strange marketing move because like I said, it was basically PR on steroids. You're just sending them on all these really, really crazy, lavish trips that like a subscriber of them could probably never dream of going on, but like they get to go just so they'll swatch an eyeshadow palette next to a pool, right? So I think that was number one. It was kind of a weird thing to begin with. And number two, I think that the real issue that started to come was you could see that brands were sort of buying the loyalty of these influencers with these brand trips. And I think that it starts to become at that point sort of ethically a weird line to walk. Because were these influencers praising, for example, the Benefit Hoola contour stick, which they later said was trash, but when it came out, they were absolutely praising it. Were they praising it because they actually liked it at the time? Or were they praising it because Benefit had just taken them to Hawaii for a week and they wanted the opportunity to go do that again? Were they praising the Tarte, you know, eyeshadow palette because it was actually a really solid product? Or was it because they wanted to get another Roomba sent to them or another blender sent to them them from Tarte as a brand. Tarte and Benefit and these other brands started forming these relationships with these influencers that almost made it feel like they were their friends and they were like gifting them all of these things. But in reality, Tarte just wanted the free promotion. It almost seems like there was this unwritten rule, and this was especially bad in like 2017, 2018, I feel, where if you spoke negatively about one of these brands, that meant that you weren't going to be going on a brand trip again. So I think it deterred a lot of these bigger players in the beauty community. I think it deterred them from being more honest about the brands that were paying for all of these things. And the other thing I think it did is it kind of sort of put other brands who maybe couldn't afford to take influencers on this type of trip, who could barely afford the freaking sponsored posts to begin with, it kind of put those brands on the back burner. You weren't really seeing them as much in influencer videos because they weren't the ones that were sending them on all these vacations. And also it gets into a weird ethical dilemma of like disclosure, because if you're promoting a Tarte product, for example, or a Benefit eyebrow pencil, do you have to disclose that by endorsing this product right now, you could potentially be getting to go to Hawaii in 3 months? It's kind of a gray area because you're not being paid. It's not a sponsored post and you technically got it for free, which, you know, most influencers disclosed, but there was that ulterior motivation there to be slightly dishonest about product because they were getting these free vacations. And honestly, I can't even fully blame the influencers for that. Like, I can't even fully blame people for not wanting to be 100% honest because they're going on vacations that could have cost like $40,000 to $50,000 completely for free. Who would want to blow that by just like saying they didn't like something? It was almost a way of sponsoring an influencer without the influencer having to say they were sponsored, which is just kind of a moral gray area. And I also think it low-key made these influencers feel very indebted to these brands. I think a lot of times it's very easy to look at everything in sort of the business sphere as transactional, but I can imagine the pressure you would feel if this brand just took you to Hawaii and the sole purpose of you going to Hawaii was to promote this eyeshadow palette, right? And you get the eyeshadow palette and it's horrible, but you're already in Hawaii. You're already there. The whole sole purpose was for you to go and promote it. The sole purpose was so when you got home, you would make a review video about this palette. So you make the review video and you're positive about it because you feel this sort of indebted to the brand. They spent all this money on you. It's a lot more complicated. And I think that brands were definitely purposefully feeding into that and sort of manipulating influencers in that way to get them to talk very positively about their products. So that was sort of the ethical dilemma of brand trips on a business level, but there's also a lot of personal stuff that went down that I think is very important to talk about when we're discussing this topic. I'm going to get into Dote, but I want to talk about the pettier stuff first. I feel like Dote is a very serious issue and also can be seen across all of these trips, but I think first it's important to talk about these trips always had drama. Always. There was always some type of drama on them. Usually on these trips, people could bring like their partner, if they had a boyfriend or girlfriend, they were able to bring their partner on these trips, and depending on your follower count, obviously. Your follower count dictated all of the privileges that you got. So you had scandals that were like cheating scandals where influencers were sleeping with other influencers' boyfriends. You had stories coming out about people drunkenly screaming at other people. You had stories of physical altercations that went down when influencers were fighting with each other. And on top of that, you had a lot of stories of sort of bad behavior from a lot of people. And this is the other sort of inherent issue with brand trips, like as a concept. When you put a group of people, we all have heard about how toxic influencer culture is. I've made like 1.2 billion videos about how toxic influencer culture is. It's incredibly toxic. When you put all of those people in a room together and you dictate the sort of room they get by follower count, and you dictate the sort of privileges that they may get by follower count, and you put all of them together and they really have no thing in common except for the fact that they're all influencers and they all make a ton of money and they're all very rich, obviously conversations are going to get a little bit cliquey. Like they're going to get a little mean. People might only want to hang out with other people for clout. They might only want to hang out with other people because they have a certain follower account. People who were already friends before going on the trip are probably going to be a little bit more cliquey than people who weren't friends or people who didn't know anybody. So obviously you had issues of cliques happening on a lot of these trips. Based on what I've seen from a lot of vlogs of people really detailing how these brand trips go down, it's not just a fun vacation where people can do whatever they want. There's scheduled activities that everybody has to be at. So you have to be at dinner at 7, you have to be at this activity at 5 5 p.m. You have to be playing volleyball at this time. You have to be going jet skiing at this time. It's almost like camp, except all of these people secretly have drama and don't really like each other. So obviously there was a lot of accusations of bullying. There was a lot of accusations of people only caring about follower count and numbers. There was a lot of flexing and bragging on these trips where people would just end up talking about how much money they got paid. It was a lot. It seems like in general, the consensus around brand trips for a lot of people was that they became kind of too toxic to even go on in the first place. So there was like no point in even going because it was such a toxic environment and it wasn't even fun to go on this vacation because it got so toxic. So all of this was happening, and then we had the real issue of Dote, which Dote, as far as I can tell, is like a marketplace app that just utilized all of these young Emma Chamberlain style lifestyle influencers to promote their brand. Emma Chamberlain was kind of queen of the Dote girls for like a hot minute there, but you had other girls. You had like Hannah Maloche, like all these other lifestyle girls, right? And they would take them to Coachella, they would take them to Arizona, they would take them to Texas, they would take them to Fiji, like they would take them to all these different locations. And I saw that Dote actually not only worked with the mega influencers and took them on nice vacations, but they also took smaller influencers, people with like 150,000 subs who were like lifestyle girls, took them to like Disney or took them anywhere. And the problem with Dote was that it was exposed by a few of the girls who went on the trip that Dote had kind of inherently racist practices, which was pretty damning to Dote. And the evidence behind this was, again, pretty damning. For example, there was a trip to Coachella that all of these girls went on. All of the standard, very skinny, traditionally pretty Dote girls went on. They invited 4 girls who were black on this trip. And those 4 girls were pretty much separated from the rest of the house. The white skinny Dote girls were on one side and the black Dote girls were on the other side. So they had segregated housing in this house. And then when you looked at the difference in the rooms that they were given, the white girls were given rooms that had like big beds and had cute little furnishings and like beautiful bathrooms. And the black girls were basically put in a living room with couches that were converted to beds. And on top of that, a lot of the girls that went who were black or had different skin tones that weren't white talked about feeling, segregated from the group, felt like the group of white girls were very cliquey. They also felt like the brand did not care to get photographs with them or get pictures of them. And even if they did get photographs of them and pictures of them, they didn't post them on their social medias. You have to remember too, a big positive for these influencers for going on these trips was not only they got to go on vacation, but also they would get to be featured on the brand's Instagram. They would get to be featured by other influencers in their vlogs or Instagram photos, which would in turn be a level of exposure, which when you're an influencer, even though you can't get paid in exposure is definitely very helpful. I'm going to link a lot of the creators who spoke out their videos down below, and also Tiffany Ferg has a really great video just fully detailing the whole Dote situation, and she does a great job at sort of uplifting the creators who talked about this. As this started coming out about Dote, it also seemed that other brand trips and other trips like this were suffering in the same way, where inclusivity was the kind of last thing on the radar of these brands. So this not only had a negative impact for brands like Dote who had these stories coming out, but it had a really negative impact on the people who went on the trips, the girls who participated in this sort of cliquey behavior. They had to really come and explain themselves, and most of them just didn't. They just pretended that it didn't happen and ignored it, which in turn I've not seen a Dote trip in a very long time. So there was a moment there where Dotechella was like the only thing people talked about. So that all happened. And so now we're getting into sort of current times. All of this has happened. There's obviously a lot of shady stuff that went down, from like bad behavior to the sort of gray area of buying an influencer loyalty with a vacation. All of that happened, obviously. And then COVID happened and all of these brand trips stopped. You couldn't really do brand trips like this anymore because you couldn't travel. So we haven't had these brand trips in over a year. And while some influencers have come forward and said that certain brands have tried to book them for brand trips despite the COVID pandemic, they haven't said names of who those brands were. So I have no idea like what the real tea is on that, but I guess some brands have been trying to book trips sort of behind the scenes. I have to wonder if the world of influencer brand trips is going to change somewhat dramatically given the COVID pandemic and everything that has happened. I think there's a couple of things to consider. Number one, the COVID pandemic, given that that's going to be coming somewhat, we're going to hopefully have some closure to that soon. Again, I want to be very clear. I don't know if this is over yet. There's so much that could still go wrong, but I'm really just, again, fingers crossed that people could start traveling again and going on these brand trips. You have to consider, though, that especially in the United States, and I know in other parts of the world, the economy is absolutely destroyed. And the lasting impact of the coronavirus and the impact it will have on the homelessness crisis that we already have here in America, the impact it will have on people who have lost their jobs and have had to collect unemployment or accrue massive amounts of debt in order to stay afloat during this time, there is going to be long-lasting implications for our economy and for everybody. So even before all of this happened, it was a little bit off-putting to get to see influencers like flexing these amazing, beautiful trips where they got to just like leave reality, it seemed. Even before all of this happened, it was a little bit off-putting, and I think people were starting to just kind of be over it. But now, given everything that's happened, I can't imagine that trips like this and this sort of exposure of wealth is going to be well received. I think a really good example is the Kim Kardashian birthday thing, which I've talked about before, but she posted photos where she got to fly her family to a private island and pretend COVID didn't exist. And she got pretty roasted for that, seemingly tone deaf. And I think the COVID pandemic is going to change flex culture as we know it entirely already. But I think the impact that that's going to have on brand trips is going to be pretty severe. Instead of people watching to watch this beautiful vacation that their fave got to go on, that they were like kind of jealous about, but like, it's also cool, like good for you, you get to go on this. I think people are going to be watching those brand trips with a different lens now. I think influencers that go on those brand trips are going to maybe seem more out of touch than they did before. And on top of that, I think that a lot of influencers in general, I think that this whole year has obviously not changed all of them, because some of them still just like go to parties all the time and don't care. But I do think that this has changed a lot of people's sort of perspective on the world. I think that's kind of an inevitable thing when we collectively all go through the trauma that is a global pandemic. I think that this has changed a lot of people's perspective. And I think that perspective change has made it so influencers, especially I've noticed lifestyle influencers, are seemingly a lot less sort of, I don't want to say fake because I feel like that sounds mean, but I did a whole evolution of lifestyle, YouTubers video. And I think the interesting thing about them lately is they have a lot more realness to them. And I don't think they're willing to put up with sort of fake friendships or fake relationships in the way that they may be used to in order to participate in brand trips like this. It seems like a lot of influencers are kind of over pretending to be besties with everybody in the community just for the sake of like clout. And it also seems like for a lot of makeup influencers, there have been a lot who have openly talked about the fact that they just like don't go on brand trips anymore because of how not fun and toxic they are. So I think I'm really curious to see, are brand trips still going to be a thing in a post-COVID world? And if they are, who is going on them? What influencers are they going to be targeting? I would assume probably the younger demographic of lifestyle influencers, kind of the new Emma Chamberlains that might be popping up, those types of people. But it's very hard to tell, and it'll be interesting to see how they do things, if they're a little bit different. I also just think in general, because we have kind of moved out of the phase of, I always feel bad when I say this, but I do feel like a lot of bigger influencers, especially bigger makeup influencers who relied on review-based videos back in, 2016, 2017, 2018, I feel like their trust has kind of been lost. A lot of people don't trust bigger influencers anymore. If they want honest product reviews, they're turning to more mid-sized, smaller influencers. And while I think that that's a positive thing that we are, looking for honesty, I think that that kind of kills the whole point of the brand trip, because people are onto it now. Like, I feel like people didn't really understand the complexities of influencer marketing when all of this first started, but now it's not hard to piece together like, oh yeah, of course you're promoting that palette from Benefit. You got taken to Hawaii 3 months ago by them, and you'll probably go on another trip soon. Like, I think now that consumers are sort of onto it, I have to question if brands will continue to get a return on investment by taking all of these influencers on these big trips. Even though they might be saving money by getting a lot of people to promote their stuff, if that promotion isn't beneficial and if it's not working because people are kind of onto it and people don't really trust these influencers anymore, is it going to be worth it for them to continue to do that, or are they going to have to switch strategies to appeal to the sort of YouTube audience crowd? I'm very interested to know what you guys think about this topic, because I think it's super, super interesting, and I also think it's just wild. Like, I can't imagine, I'm telling you right now, like, those brand trips, it blows my mind how much money these brands probably spent on brand trips, especially brands like Tarte. It absolutely blows my mind. I'm so interested to see how things evolve, and I'm very interested to know how you guys feel about this, because I think it's a really, really interesting topic, and I think it's going to be interesting to watch how things go, but that's gonna be it for me. Let's close the Google Doc. That's gonna be it for me. I hope you guys like this video. If you did, please like and subscribe, or just subscribe, or do neither. Honestly, just so happy you're watching me. Thank you so much for being here. My merch, my social media, and everything I am wearing on my face will be linked down below, along with some links and information about the rise in Asian hate crimes that have been happening since the start of the COVID-19 pandemic. It is super important to stay informed and stay involved on that. I love you guys so much, and I will see you in the next one. Bye!